Hey, Dr. Michael Fisher, fearologist, fearanalyst, educator, and just someone very interested in the social, cultural, psychological atmosphere, the era that we're going into post November 5th, the US election, President Donald Trump, etc., and just a whole other lot of things that I like to include in my talks. I can go all over the place because I'm transdisciplinary and how I come to knowledge and how I come to methodologies and how I come to the very offerings that I have, perhaps even prescriptions at times. For what? For both individual and collective well being, the good. A soulful approach, sometimes spiritual, sometimes not so spiritual. Be ready to expect anything from what I might say. Most of it is spontaneous, but I do have some notes this morning because I was thinking of the topic particularly of social psychiatry, sometimes called cultural psychiatry, and sometimes just called psychiatry of the social or the social work. Psychiatric social work, for example, would be one term that's used out there in the professions. But ultimately, this number six of the series is Close Encounters with Psychiatry, and that's exactly what I'm going to be on to today. I encourage you to look at any of those 5 videos I've done on my close encounters with psychiatry, a lot of personal autobiographic, as well as just larger issues and theoretical, philosophical, theological, but obviously medical as well, and what is happening in mental health today. So I started in my note journaling today, my early morning contemplative experience, and I like to just let words flow, let things flow from the day before. And the statistics that's holding with me right now, which is a fairly reliable source and so on average in the US, since 1999, data shows longitudinally that 30% more of suicides are in the adult population um, rising. So a 30% increase since 1999 on average of suicides and or probably attempted suicides. I don't know the exact fine data. All right. Enough to go, well, okay, that's significant over a period of, 25 years. But again, when I heard the next statistic, I was even more sort of, oh, okay, yeah, don't ignore this. Like, this is too easy to ignore. Even as a citizen, it's easy to ignore. Why would I care? Why does it matter to me? Does it affect my life? But obviously, I'm a practitioner and care about the mental health of society and culture and where we're going in the future. I have vested interests in all of that because of my studies, because of my practices. So the second statistic was a lot more tough to hear. And I was not surprised, but I don't like hearing it. And that is for teenagers, that is youth, however they exactly define that. The rate of suicides since 1999 is 70% higher, i.e., a lot of youth at risk, in risk, and killing themselves. Now, I'm not talking here today about suicide and my philosophy of suicide. Another topic for another time. If you're really interested in that, uh, drop me a line below in the comment box, and I will certainly pursue any of the questions, queries that you have, and get back to you. So, what that led me to is then dealing with this notion we've probably, if you're listening at all, is there's a mental health crisis, right, in the world for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of crises in the world that are ecological, economic, political, and I had to take on since November 5th, 2024, and the President Trump winning this election, and where's that going to go and how's that going to affect mental health? Then I started making associations. So that's what I'm going to track through with you right now, some of the associations with why I care about that and why it needs a deep analysis and why social psychiatry has a role to play. And I'm going to show today why I think it has an ironic, if not paradoxical, if not contradictory role it's actually playing, social psychiatry. In other words, psychiatrists that are diagnosing and caring about what's going on in the social environment, the cultural environment, the political environment. They all kind of overlap. So, where to begin with? I think I'll talk about the meta context, therefore, for anyone interested in parenting, education, how we operate with youth. You've got to take in that statistic that suicide rates are rising in a very dramatic way. So I've heard that from practitioners in the field. I've heard that theoretically. I've heard it in talks. So I'm saying it's a meta context. In other words, it's a context that sort of shapes and informs and emotionally and effectively gets us involved with what is happening and what's useful in our life and important in that regard. That so many youth, for example, are in such despair, obviously, of some kind, to commit suicide or at least attempt it, etc. Not a good thing. Now, that's not a judgment on the choices that people make individually, which I do not know of what those choices are. Therefore, I cannot make any statement about individuals who practice that as a strategy for how they want to live and or end their life in the world of suicidology. So that aside, back to the mental health issue is one could say we're in dangerous times. And you got to sort of think and pattern that anyone who enters that suicidology, that domain of the suicidal, of real experiencing, and then obviously real thought forms that go with it, and how to actually manage that suicidology, and the despair that's with that, one could argue, and the terror that's with that. And I'm basically saying they are reacting to a dangerous time with dangerous means. Really important to hook that. Dangerous times and dangerous means. So that's how I understand the system of suicidology, which is so much bigger than that term. Why? Because, for example, social psychologists have come in the last little while, and they created a book written by the author Bandy Lee, a forensic psychiatrist herself, big Yale medical school, has a Yale divinity master's degree, etc. And they are talking about and have written a book. I'll just see what her title is: The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, end of quote. And I know she is out there particularly leading this group called the World Mental Health Coalition. So this is an activist group of mental health professional practitioners and psychiatrists combined. And in that book that was put out a couple of years ago, before Donald Trump was actually going to win this election, and they were warning the public and are still warning, and she does videos, as Bandy Lee, constantly under this group, World Mental Health Coalition. She's probably some like the leader or director or something. And she is basically saying we are in dangerous times, right? Listen to the title, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. Well, no, it's the dangerous case of society, who is electing and has prepared the ground for. The dangerous case has already been prepared. And of course, that goes back historically as far as you want. We could call that post-traumatic danger zone that we're reaching. And it's, again, an acute crisis, perhaps. Now, many think Donald Trump is the answer to that acute, dangerous crisis, that felt sense that the United States empire is falling, which it is in many, from various reference points and other critical perspectives. And of course, lots of people don't believe that or want to believe it. So they want to believe there's a great leader that will save America, make America great again, mega. Bandy Lee comes out with 40, this is the subtitle, 40 mental health experts and psychiatrists have pronounced that Donald Trump has a mental disorder, an untreated mental disorder that is dangerous. He's practicing, and I'm quoting, a dangerous psychology, end of quote. Um, it's verging, in their opinion, on the edge of criminality. In other words, forensic, psychiatric criminality. She's a forensic expert, psychiatrist. So it's a vested interest in her, right? So all of that aside, I'm going to now wind into why this is disturbing for me, listening to this for many years. And other people are saying things like that about Donald Trump too, and even people who are not psychiatrists, right? That's the whole thing. See, this spreads like a meme. And I'm not sure who started this idea that Donald Trump is psychiatrically unstable and or pathologically disordered in a dangerous way. But I can tell you, following Marianne Williamson, who ran for president and leader of the Democrat Project Party for what, 6 years now, I followed her very intensely, wrote a book on her, and there is she out in public, and she's saying the same thing, that we have a dangerous person that she's running against of the type caliber of, i.e., Donald Trump. So it's been used as a political weapon. So now we've got mental health, right? Psychiatric diagnoses being thrown around as terms that were meant to be used mainly by psychiatrists, trained MDs, right? Psychologists will also use those terms. Social workers will sometimes use those terms. But we'll call them the mental health professionals. That's their language for labeling behaviors and what they see in their clients. Now, Donald Trump is nobody's client. He is not a client of these psychiatrists, these 40 who co-signed this book and said, yes, we agree with Bandy Lee, and we've all come to this conclusion. We need to warn the public in a book publicly published, as well as all these videos that they do, that he is a dangerous person. He is psychiatrically ill, suffering from X number of disorders. I haven't read the book, so you can, or you can listen to some of Bandy's podcasts. I've listened to one. As I listened to her, I was less and less trusting of what's going on and of her, particularly as a psychiatrist. They are using a concept of fit leadership. So they believe, these psychiatrists, mental health practitioners, they believe they have the right to publicly, in a way, denounce, that is, diagnose psychiatrically, social psychiatrically, cultural psychiatrically, diagnose someone who is a danger to humanity. And their argument is he is not fit leadership. Quote, this is the term they're using. We're looking for, they're saying, excuse me, that we want fit leadership in the world. And our job, since they're pointing to themselves, they've made themselves this, and they feel they have the accreditation, right, to do it, the legitimation to be doctors, more or less, to diagnose social figures, public figures, political figures in public. Whoa, that's a big jump. That's a big jump from the clinical office, where confidentiality, where you do a full clinical evaluation of the client, carefully documented in confidentiality, and that client knows that they are under diagnoses and they are co-participating for the most part. Some are probably forced, more or less, to go to a psychiatrist evaluation. And the courts will do that. But here is a public figure running for president being put under the psychiatric lens. And a lot of people are using it. The left, the progressive left, has grabbed onto those kinds of terms too. And they're throwing that at anyone who supports Donald Trump. Hey, guys, you're supporting an unfit leader based on he's a narcissist, he's a this, he's a that. He has a psychiatric problem and he's ill. So do not have him as our president of this country. So you see, what's happening is this shift from the clinical practice. Now, here's it gets really twisted to me. Again, I was saying I was not trusting listening to this individual, Bandy Lee. I can't say what the other 40 people or 39 on in that book where they're coming from. I don't know who they are. But I got to watch her and I watch people very carefully. And I just got this feeling I do not trust where she's coming from fully. I think she's probably accurate about a lot of things. I have some of the very same thoughts. I have mixed feelings about Donald Trump's health, mental health. I have mixed feelings. I do think he is dangerous to many human beings. But here, back to the psychiatrist, which is this video is about, the focus, as much as I support their caring and their wanting to use their profession to guide and warn society of dangerous individuals, right? Mentally just dangerous, psychiatrically dangerous. And they feel they should warn people. Well, they sort of should, I guess. I guess. You see, it's tricky because now it's starting to get really messy when they go public with those diagnoses when they haven't had Donald Trump in their office. So let's keep in mind, they are not Donald Trump's psychiatrist. They are not Donald Trump's mental health practitioner that he's chosen like every human being chooses. If you wish to have those specialists of various kind do an assessment on you because you think you need it. No, there's no permission, you see. And that to me is you're breaking code here now. Codes of ethics, right? Biomedical codes of ethics of the practicing doctor, the practicing psychiatrist, whatever the case, could be a social workers, all these mental health practitioners, psychologists, I don't know who they are, but they're likely of those labels and professions. And maybe they're good people. I don't know. I don't know what their politics is. Are they using psychiatric diagnosis as a political weapon because they want to win on the left? And I'm guessing probably a lot of them more or less are unconsciously or consciously. That's a dangerous territory, isn't it? And then the public are picking up and think, oh, that's the label. But just take for a moment what I thought about this morning was, okay, so here's this left progressive type mental health practitioners calling out, shaming with psychiatric labeling, someone who is running for leader of the Republican Party on the right. What is that doing to a fabric of the social cultural community, of the city, of the nation, of the state, of the states, of the United States? It is not making a United States when you do that kind of labeling publicly. Why? Well, just think and carry that through. Here's the logic I have is if half of the side, is saying that and of course they're trying to pretend they're neutral. They totally say that. Bandy says that this is not political. We are neutral. We are being objective. We are scientific. We are trained to diagnose. And I just go, no, no, no. Sounds good. Sounds like you're trying to be objective. Well, that's fine. Try to be objective. I try to be objective too, and all kinds of judgments I make, but I know that I'm not completely. Those other factors come in of the subjective, my biases, right? Their biases. So what problem is that they are diagnosing a leader that half of the country is more or less in awe of and wants them to be president of the United States. So basically, what this other group doing the diagnosis and all those who support that, to try and pull down that category, that candidate for president, this could be done in another election too. It just happened to be Donald Trump this time that's getting all this press and all these diagnoses psychiatrically. I'm sure some of them have been flown around at those kind of diagnoses and other presidents at different times, but certainly not like now. It's huge what they're trying to do. And this group, this coalition, in for the good, right, to protect us. But what they're basically doing is that now Donald Trump's elected, the messaging from all of that side of people who have fallen into this discourse and utilize this mental health psychiatric labeling, a negative label. There's no way around it. It's negative socially. Okay, you may not want it to be, but it is. You may not trying to be create that, but you are. You're creating a huge stigma that is deeply, deeply hurtful, deeply, deeply undermining of a person's integrity when they have not chosen to have you give them that diagnosis. And then you're putting out across and spreading it like a virus meme. Well, that means that all the people who voted for Donald Trump and who are very excited about the win, more or less, not everyone is excited, but they're pretty happy Donald Trump won, yeah, because they don't want the Dems in there. This is ripping a country apart. And you basically just said, oh, right, these people said implicitly, they basically said, all you people who voted for Donald Trump, you're also insane because you couldn't see that Donald Trump is insane. You're ignorant. You're ignorant that he actually has a mental disorder. You're voting for someone with a mental disorder. How dare you do this? It's actually putting everybody in danger by doing that. See, is it you've just added this dimension to the political sphere, the cultural social fabric of trying to build trust in a nation, some kind of unity, United States, which your governments need to have some social trust. You've basically divided the country even more by using this psychiatric labeling and going public with it. You have put down, intentionally, you've put down your opponents, the ones who voted for Donald Trump. That's nearly half, more than half of the country, whatever. You can look at the percents. Not good. That is a bad diagnosis. And number one, as well, I say number one is you're not supposed to share your diagnoses of a client with the public. It's called the Hippocratic Oath. You don't put out that confidentiality of a real true diagnosis. But they did. To me, they've crossed over and denied the Hippocratic Oath in that do no harm. You have done enormous harm, folks. All those with good intention. You've done enormous harm to this social fabric of that country and any other country where this happens. And I've seen people use those labels against Justin Trudeau in Canada, for example. Jordan Peterson will use those kind of labels as a psychologist himself. He'll throw out and call, Justin Trudeau pathological and some psychological label, narcissist or whatever. That is causing harm. You are qualified with these degrees in medicine, psychology, whatever it is, PhDs in so-called helping people. And you are tearing apart fabric by going public and using it as a political weapon. I have such mixed feelings about that because there are parts of me I can see why they're doing that and why that could be justified as morally sound, right? To warn people from something dangerous. Why? Because they've even used these people on this left, this mental health medical end. And remember, that's not all medical people, it's not all psychiatrists, but it's a significant number, 40 and perhaps a lot more, that keep their mouth shut. But these 40 wanted to go public, names included, as far as I know. Certainly Bandy Lee is up there putting her name out. They have taken on this greater God like status to diagnose them. Well, who else are they going to diagnose? A corporate CEO? We're going to diagnose, someone in bureaucratic leader, a school leader of a board of education, or are they going around doing this? Like, is that what social psychiatry is becoming? Ooh, you can see that's like unfettered. And the damage of doing it, see, that's what they're not diagnosing. They think they're just going after Donald Trump, trying to warn people. They're not looking at the consequences, right? The environmental, social, ecological effects of that kind of public diagnostic. Huge effects, in my opinion. And it creates an impression that people, for example, who voted for Donald Trump, I'm repeating, are going to feel that they've been put down by the left, by these other people on the other side, as that they are incapable of judging someone's mental health status. And that basically um, there's no respect there. There's no way that the left is helping the self-esteem of the people on the right. These are the other half of your country. You have to care about people's self-esteem on both sides. And I'm not here today to do a critique of the right and what they've been doing. But I can tell you, there's no psychiatrist coming out of the right that I know of. A few, maybe, or psychologists, you know, but not to this extreme of what the left has done. And again, um, the arguments are more complicated than I can give today in this short video, but I wanted to introduce what's going on and have you think about it. Have you think of how do you want to challenge these people, the World Health Coalition, so-called? And then, you can go online, for example, if I do, and, quote, look, I'm an expert in mental health and diagnosis of mental issues. Donald Trump does not have a pathology. Many people speculate on Donald Trump's alleged mental disorder, but he doesn't meet the criteria for mental illness. He's a crazy like a fox, though. End quote. From a mental health practitioner, for example. And then you can just see as I scanned, you can get people on both sides of this disagreeing on mental health classifications. And of course, now it's being done in public with somebody's name on it. This is not privatized anymore. What happened to the private client and the protection of the Hippocratic Oath? So you got my point. I don't want to beat it down, but they've also labeled something called a Trump disorder. And they're going to probably try and get it into the DSM diagnostic manual that psychiatrists and psychologists use as a standard for there's something called the Trump disorder. In other words, people get disordered mentally because Donald Trump threatens them. It's a kind of a phobia. We could call it Trumpophobia, phobia if you would. But whatever they're doing, they're using those kind of languages. And this mixing of the psychological, cultural, and social political is, to me, it has to happen to be holistic. So you see, that's where part of me I can kind of agree. Yeah, you have to look at if something's causing a lot of social distress, and I don't doubt that it is, that his followers are. When you put them all together, the phenomenon, what I've called the Donald Trump phenomenon, what Marianne Williamson called the Donald Trump phenomenon way back in 2018, when she first ran in the, to be president. These people aren't trying to be mean, but I think they do not understand the consequences of the damage to the social fabric. So here's where the paradox is. They're supposed to be social psychiatrists, and they're not paying attention to the social impact of diagnosing somebody in public, like a figure or a leader. And again, it may not be Donald Trump next time. They could go after anyone they want. They're setting precedent. So I think there's a huge legal battle here to come in, and I hope it does happen, where these people, these psychiatrists, mental health practitioners, are challenged as to what kind of practice they're doing. And is it even legal to do that? Is it a breaking of the ethical code? And of course, they're going to have their arguments that they feel the right they have in their code the ethics to warn others of danger And when somebody is dangerous to themselves and others, and they could be referring to Donald Trump, for example, he's dangerous to himself and he's dangerous to others. And putting him in president with the nuclear button underneath his finger, yeah, that's a dangerous situation if you do not trust that person's mental stability. Yeah, it's not the first time in history we've had to deal with this. I'm not trying to say anything like that. But there's something really extreme, isn't there? Isn't there? You can just feel this tension of who's going to diagnose and make judgments. And then you got to respect when people make a political judgment that they're making the best judgment that they can. And well, you could say they're deluded and they're stupid or whatever. But that's not going to build the social fabric for a nation united. So I don't know if it's even possible to ever unite the nations. I don't think America's ever been united fully. That's fine. I mean, those are just realities of their history. But if you're going to work at that at all to be a government for the people, by the people, of the people, you have certain constitutional civic right and duties. And I think the mental health people that I'm speaking about today, I'm just giving them, they're an example, not all everybody who's practicing. And then I want to end the video on all the theme of what I brought up today and in all the series really of this psychiatric encounters, as I'm calling. And I have other videos as well on psychology. Is my challenging that psychology is really reaching its end. It is reaching its own collapse of worth, as far as I'm concerned. I'm talking capital P, psychology, and all those who practice under those regimes of how they've been trained and taught these traditions of psychology. I am a strong critic and growing every day, and I'm stronger and stronger critic of left-leaning psychologies. Yes, I could be a critic of the right. Those are easy to challenge. It's harder to see, quote, the pathologies, the darkness, the shadow that's underneath these left psychologies. And I'm basically saying I think they're really done. So, for example, it really hit me when I watched Donald Trump gaining presidential capacity through this last election cycle. And watching and watching, and then I watch, who he brings on stage and who comes out to endorse him, who are psychologists, clinical registered psychologists. Well, Jordan Peterson's first. He's now been deregistered in Canada to call himself that. He can still call himself a psychologist, but he's not a registered, certified psychologist. And of course, he's fought that in court case, lost. He's very angry about it. But he is a huge impact as a psychologist, and he's coming out and came out and still continues to and say, Donald Trump's good, and Donald Trump has no problems psychiatrically or psychologically, moral, implicitly. Jordan Peters says that. And he would vote for Trump any day. Okay, so that was his endorsement. The other major psychologists, these are like the two most popular known psychologists in North America is Dr. Phil, who does this huge TV show for years and decades. And he comes out and gives a lecture. This is prior to the election by a few days. And gives a lecture for 5-10 minutes on this podcast somebody was doing, interviewing him. And he makes his case for why Donald Trump is not a bully. And Dr. Phil's expertise has been for decades, as he is proud of himself and on this podcast. He knows everything there is to know about bullying, and he goes through a case and defends it of how Donald Trump is not a bully. And I listened to it and I just went, this is like rationally irrational. The whole entire argument. And what it shows is the incredible emotional bias these psychologists of major import culturally. Jordan B. Peterson, the Canadian, Dr. Phil, the American, the two most popular and powerful media star psychologists. giving people advice and giving the nation advice in public. And you see, it's like, to me, it's just like there's no ethics controlling these people. The Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. They're not going out and speaking to do no harm. Why? Because they're standing on political side. And then they're using their credentials as a psychiatrist or psychologist to support that other side. So you see, that was my little bit to end this video is I was very hard on the left, but now the right, they do have their psychologists too, working for them. I wanted to just put all that out and say we are definitely in a mess. Psychologically, I see the capital P psychology field dying, and it's at its collapse of usefulness. And that's why I've replaced it personally with the term fearology and feariatry and fear analysis rather than psychoanalysis, psychiatry, and psychology. That's my strategy. That's my work. That's what I'm dedicated to being here to do, to plan it. So look forward to your comments on this video. Let's keep the conversation going. That's my key thing, whether you're on the right, the left, or anywhere in between. My purpose is to have good dialogue, well-informed, and respectful conversation as best we can. Right. Best to you all.